There we go. All right, party peoples of the interwebs, viva Fry, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler, currently on my way from Toronto to Milwaukee for the RNC that starts on Monday. Viva Barnes Law will be on tomorrow night, Sunday at 6 o'clock. So this is also your reminder to make sure that you are subscribed and you have your notifications turned on. As we're driving from Montreal, ultimately, to Milwaukee, stopping through Toronto for a Rebel News event that I spoke to a bunch of journalists, aspiring young journalist students. It was great. I posted that video to YouTube as well. I'm following and trying to keep up to date with what's going on in the Alec Baldwin trial. And I'm not going to recap that entire trial. You know what was going on there until the charges were dismissed with prejudice. Alec Baldwin was charged with involuntary manslaughter in the death of Helena Hutchins on the set of the Western movie Rust, where Alec Baldwin pointed a gun at and pulled the trigger of a firearm that was allegedly supposed to have only been loaded with blanks or dummy rounds, and for whatever the reason, it had a live round in it. Alec Baldwin says he didn't pull the trigger, but he pointed the gun at Helena Hutchins. The gun went off, Helena Hutchins died, and Alec Baldwin was standing trial in New Mexico for involuntary manslaughter, with carried with it a maximum sentence of 18 months in jail. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer on set, already had her trial. She was already convicted, and she is currently serving her sentence in jail. We'll see what's going to happen with that. Alec Baldwin's case, I don't want to say it was going badly for Alec Baldwin. It's not clear how well it was going right up until a bombshell of all bombshells occurred, that being the alleged failure to disclose of potentially exculpatory evidence by the prosecution to Alec Baldwin. And I say allegedly, it's now basically confirmed because the case was dismissed with prejudice for what is referred to as Brady violations. That is the failure of the prosecution to turn over relevant material, potentially exculpatory evidence to the defense, such that the defense is basically not allowed to provide a full and extensive defense for the defendant. Prevented from basically fleshing out the fullest of defenses possible because potentially exculpatory evidence was withheld from Alec Baldwin. I posted the clip of that moment in court, and I'll show a bit of a highlight at the end of this vlog. But the bottom line, during the trial, Alec Baldwin's team discovers that there was a piece of evidence, that being a box of ammo, that was brought to the attention of the prosecution after the Hannah Gutierrez-Reed conviction, and the Good Samaritan, as they're calling this person, who dropped off this box of ammunition with the prosecution saying, hey, this kind of looks like the ammunition that was found on the set of Rust where Helena Hutchins was killed. You might want to have a look at it. And apparently the prosecution just said, all right, thank you very much. And they filed it in a separate case within the police station and never disclosed it to Alec Baldwin. Now, I'm trying to understand what went down with this, and watching a lot of the analysis on the interwebs, I get the impression that a lot of the analysts don't understand the nature of that box of ammunition, because I didn't understand the nature of that box of ammunition and how it possibly could have been relevant in the first place. But set that aside, how it came known to the prosecution, how it was not disclosed to Alec Baldwin. And so not understanding it, I was like, I can't understand this. I need to go pick the brain of someone who I know understands this better than me, that being Eric Hunley, who is the host of Eric Hunley and Mark Grobert, America's Untold Stories. Eric Hunley is not an attorney, but he knows the facts of this case in greater detail than I would say 99% of the people out there. I won't go into the reasons why. You can go back and watch some of his shows on this. They have been covering the Rust shooting extensively since it occurred in October 2021. And I called him up and I was like, Hunley, you got to explain to me. I understand the broad brushstrokes. They did not disclose potentially exculpatory evidence to the defense, Brady violation, dismissed with prejudice, and now not only is the case dismissed with prejudice, meaning it can't be refiled, Alec Baldwin literally walks free, not having gotten away with murder, but having gotten away with involuntary manslaughter, potentially. Not only does he get to walk, he now gets to sue for civil rights violations because of the Brady violation committed by the prosecution. So that's the law. I just didn't understand the relevance or what this piece of evidence was. I picked Hunley's brain and he explained it, and I understand it now. And it's, I don't want to say scandalous in the Brady violation sense. It's suspicious in the what in the name of sweet holy hell is going on in this case. Okay, after Hannah Gutierrez-Reed is convicted, somebody, a quote, Good Samaritan, drops off a box of ammunition with the prosecution and says, you might want to look into this. It might be relevant because it looks like the ammunition that was found on the site of Rust. The individual who dropped off that ammunition is best friends with Thel Reed. I think I'm saying his name right. Hannah Gutierrez Reed's father. The man who dropped off this ammunition, the Good Samaritan, is a former cop, current judge, best friends with Hannah Gutierrez Reed's father, drops off this ammunition after Hannah Gutierrez Reed's conviction and says to the prosecutors or the investigators, you might find this relevant. It kind of looks like the ammunition found on the set because this guy had it stored somewhere on his own property. Okay, why on earth would that have happened potentially? My thoughts, and this is my thoughts only, is that after Hannah was convicted, well, then her father wants to get his daughter out of jail, obviously, has got a friend who's a former cop, knows how things work, current judge, says, well, she's convicted. Let's try to find some new evidence and then potentially have an argument for reopening the investigation because there's now new evidence that could be potentially exculpatory for Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Okay, fine. That might explain why this Good Samaritan, who's best friends with Hannah's father, after the conviction, drops off this new evidence. It gets classified, for whatever the reason, under a separate case file with the police. And so it's not tied into or filed under the Alec Baldwin case. And so that explains how it sort of either got lost or was not disclosed to Alec Baldwin's defense team in the context of the trial. How it becomes discovered in the context of the trial, not exactly sure. I know it was in cross-examination where there was reference to some other report that was referenced in a report that was filed with Alec Baldwin, and that report referenced this box of ammunition that was filed under a separate investigation case number, not in the Alec Baldwin case. That's when things unraveled. That's when they got the prosecutor on the stand as a witness to explain how she failed to disclose to the defense this box of ammunition. All right. How they became known of this, I don't know. It could be that someone goes to Alec Baldwin as this trial is going and says, do you know about this additional box of ammunition? Oh, you don't? Why don't you? You should. And then, huzzah, Alec Baldwin gets to claim Brady violation. The question in law is, what relevance could this have even had in the first place? That's a question that you need not ask because that would be up for the defense to say, oh, we get this box of ammunition, we now potentially get to raise new arguments in defense. Was this ammunition the same ammunition? Was the person who packed this ammunition or reloaded these cartridges deliberately trying to sabotage the set of Rust? If so, Alec Baldwin's got an even stronger defense for him not being able or being in a position to distinguish, this dog is driving me crazy, distinguish between live rounds and dummy rounds because it was sabotage. As far as I'm concerned, in law, that doesn't change the act of negligence of pointing a firearm at a person. You never know what's in there. That's why you never do it. Set that aside. It could have been an additional grounds of defense. If there's actual sabotage and someone wanted to sabotage the set of Rust, my goodness, do you know that the defense, Alec Baldwin, wants to know that, needs to know that, and has a constitutional right to know that there is such evidence that could potentially open the door to that argument. So they did not disclose this evidence, this box of ammunition, and Alec Baldwin, in so having been deprived of that evidence, is deprived of other grounds of defense he could have raised. It was at a stage of the trial where the damage had been done, jeopardy had been attached, a jury had been impaneled. You're into the trial. They didn't raise this in opening arguments, in opening statements, because they didn't have this information. So he has been irreparably prejudiced by the conduct of the prosecutor. In the testimony of the prosecutor, which I watched, well, it became very clear the judge was very angry at what the judge believed to be deliberate acts of the prosecution, Morrissey, the prosecutor, the special prosecutor, to not disclose this potentially relevant evidence to Alec Baldwin. And in her ruling to dismiss with prejudice, which needs to fit a certain bunch of very, very stringent criteria, she said it was deliberate, it was potentially relevant, potentially exculpatory, and therefore the only remedy at this point is dismissal with prejudice. So that's it. That is the thorough breakdown of what this new evidence was, how it was magically dropped off by a Good Samaritan who has ties to the father of the convicted Hannah Gutierrez Reed, how it was misfiled. We don't know if it was deliberately misfiled or accidentally misfiled, how that misfiling was then kept secret or not disclosed to Alec Baldwin until this trial went on, and then it's disclosed to him as this trial is ongoing. But that's the evidence. That's what happened. And now, in addition to getting to walk scot-free, Alec Baldwin has a potential constitutional claim personally against prosecutor, the special the special prosecutor there, Morrissey, for violation of his Brady rights. And that's it. Alec Baldwin still faces a ton of civil cases, so he's not off the hook, so to speak, and monetarily speaking, he's still on the hook. but he's not going to face any jail time. The question is also going to be, is this going to allow Hannah Gutierrez-Reed to revisit her case? Because if this was potentially relevant evidence that was withheld from Baldwin in his trial so that he couldn't raise the argument of deliberate sabotage or other defenses, there might not be the same Brady violations for Hannah Gutierrez-Reed because this occurred after her conviction and wasn't withheld from her, but it might have an impact in that it might be new relevant evidence that could allow Hannah Gutierrez-Reed to say, I did my job as well as I could. This was deliberate sabotage. We'll see. I expect Hannah Gutierrez-Reed to be filing a motion sooner than later, but that is the detailed breakdown analysis. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it enlightened you. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm. You can follow me at Viva Fry on Rumble, the Viva Fry on Twitter, and the best place for an above average law community, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Tomorrow night, Sunday night show. Stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. Monday, RNC in Milwaukee. Bada bing, bada boom. Now you know your vlog. Peace out, peeps. Booyah!
Dismissal with prejudice is a very extreme sanction. And case law is very clear that because it's very extreme, I have to go through every single element and I have to make a very good record as to why I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So, in order to establish a Brady violation, the defendant must show that the prosecution suppressed evidence, the evidence was favorable to the accused, and the evidence was material to the defense. This prong is satisfied. The suppressed evidence is favorable to the accused. It is impeachment evidence, has even been offered in this trial as impeachment evidence, and is potentially exculpatory to the defense. Critically, the exculpatory value cannot be analyzed at such a late juncture because of the non-disclosure. This evidence is material. The late discovery of this evidence during trial has impeded the effective use of evidence in such a way that it has impacted the fundamental fairness of the proceedings. The state's willful withholding of this information was intentional and deliberate. If this conduct does not rise to the level of bad faith, it certainly comes so near to bad faith as to show signs of scorching. Further, the sanction of dismissal is warranted in this case. The state has repeatedly made representations to defense and to the court that they were compliant with all their discovery obligations. Despite their repeated representations, they have continued to fail to disclose critical evidence to the defendant. Your motion to dismiss with prejudice is granted.